and the other is the Truth and Reconciliation that was chaired by Bishop Tutu. Now, to understand the first topic that dealt with, that must deal with the negotiation process, the viewers must understand first some events that took place before the negotiations were conducted. One of the events is that the ad hoc committee of the AU met in Harare together with the ANC and the PAC in exile, and they agreed that negotiations should be started. And as a result of that, the two liberation movements had agreed that they will, therefore, from that date, start a process of trying to get the regime to negotiate with them. However, the ANC went ahead and held a lot of talks, 3 if I'm not, if I remember very well. Now, those talks that the ANC held were held prior to the actual negotiation process. So as a result, therefore, the negotiation, when they started, the ANC had already sort of negotiated certain things with the regime. Some of the negotiation took place at Portsmouth and Victor Verster prison with Mandela as a single individual, and the other negotiations took place at various places. And these they called that it was just pre-negotiation talks about talks. But the fact that the ANC alone, without other liberation movement, had done that, it placed a lot of difficulties for the Azanian People's Organization, because we knew that they were doing that. But however, we felt that we were duty-bound to talk to them as liberation movements. So when the situation arose that the Harare Declaration was to be discussed, we went to a conference for a democratic future together with COSATU, NACTU, and the UDF to discuss the Harare Declaration, which was agreed upon in Harare, as I said earlier. And of course, we didn't agree with some of the issues that were raised by the Harare Declaration. And we felt very strongly that the Harare Declaration did not include specifically issues relating to the reconquest of land, that the Azanian people were entitled to get their land back and that the Harare Declaration should specifically have talked about the question of land reconquest. That is just one single issue that we raised at the meeting. And of course, when the meeting finally wanted to adopt the Harare Declaration as it is, we then said to the meeting that we would need to consult with our constituencies, because this fundamental matter was not dealt with. Of course, the Congress movement, if I were to term them that way, they went ahead and said, well, now they are happy and they are going to implement it. But with hindsight, we knew also that they had already accepted what the ANC had accepted in Harare. From that Congress of the Democratic Future, we felt very strongly that we would have to set up meetings with the ANC and the PAC as the organizations we regarded as fellow liberation movement. We went ahead under my leadership to meet with the Pan-Africanist Congress, and agreements were reached that if negotiations were to take place, the liberation movement will go to the negotiation table as one, as a patriotic front. The PAC then also raised a very crucial matter, which we agreed to, that they have forces that are operating from abroad, from outside the country, and that they needed a meeting between us and them to take place where these forces would also attend. We also agreed, because we had forces under the BCMA, the Black Consciousness Movement of Azania, who were operating also outside the country, and we then said that is okay, we can meet. We then negotiated with the government of Zimbabwe that we should meet in Zimbabwe. So a collective effort was undertaken by ourselves and the Pan-Africanist Congress to meet in Zimbabwe, and we finally met at a place called Kadoma in Zimbabwe to further discuss and reach common consensus on what should take place when we actually enter the negotiation process, and also to make sure that the liberation struggle is not subverted. We met and agreed, and there is a document called the Kadoma document, which is available for people to read. And in that document, the question of the land is also clearly enunciated, because that is the question that we felt very strongly that it should not be undermined. The other question that we felt very strongly and agreed with the PAC was the question of the economy, the question of the wealth of our country. And so we came back from Zimbabwe with the hope that we would be able to convince the African National Congress also to agree with the Azanian People's Organization on these matters. We went ahead and met with the ANC not only once. We met with them probably 3 times. So, and it was also agreed with the African National Congress that a common approach will be the one that the liberation movement would take. And the question of the Patriotic Front was agreed, and a committee was appointed with representatives from each liberation movement, and that committee was to facilitate the holding of a meeting in Durban, so that as a Patriotic Front members, we could discuss matters relating to all matters that would be necessary if negotiations were to take place, and it was agreed that we would then go to the negotiation table as a Patriotic Front. But just after some few days, we don't know what happened, but we learned later that the African National Congress was not very happy with our position, because our position was that if we were to form a patriotic front, that front would be formed by the PAC and the Black Consciousness Movement together with the ANC and those forces like the South African Communist Party, COSATU, NACTU, the trade union movement then only, without bringing in the Bantustan leaders. The ANC at that stage was of the view that the Bantustan leaders would also form part of the Patriotic Front. So we couldn't agree, because, as you know, the Black Consciousness Movement had always felt that the Bantustan leaders were carrying out a program that was meant to balkanize our country. And so therefore, we couldn't see those leaders as part of the Patriotic Front, which is meant to make sure that there is a unitary state. And so the ANC did not agree. But still, we agreed that we will go to the Patriotic Front meeting and see whether we cannot convince members of other formations in the trade union movement and NGOs to see our view. Little did we know that this was really a sore point on the ANC, although they didn't really tell us that it is such a crucial point that will make the Patriotic Front not to occur. Later we learned that the ANC and the PAC met alone without us, and in the meeting that they held, they decided to expel us from the convening committee for the Patriotic Front. We didn't understand why they did so, but we were expelled. Second point which made them to expel us was that the ANC had also indicated that the Democratic Party, which is now the DA, was also going to be part of the Patriotic Front. And if you knew you know the AZAPO and the Black Consciousness Movement, liberals of that nature to us were really a sore point to be included on a matter which is supposed to bring about fundamental change in our country. So we objected to that, and we even wrote a letter to them through our Secretary General then, Comrade Donning Kadime, indicating to them that that is not a matter which we will be able to tolerate, because really the Black Consciousness movement was basically a movement which fought the against the balkanization of our country, and throughout its existence, that was the fundamental point that you would not move us from. In fact, it was a point that led us to be excluded from the Patriotic Front. Now, if you were to think today what the DA is doing, what the liberals are all about, you would then agree that we were very consistent. Even today, we would not agree to the liberals having to meddle in the affairs of our country. The liberals, even now, they are refusing to let Section 25, which talks about the question of land in the Constitution, to be amended. And these are the guys that we were told that they're okay. They fundamentally agree with our program. So that's how it went. And so we were not able to attend the Patriotic Front meeting. Other organizations that went there, they called for those who participated to say they must come and see us, so that because we are right. But that never happened, because there was now another new program, which, as I said earlier, was being facilitated by the ANC and the government of the day, where they were now pushing for negotiations to take place. So when this matter of negotiation was being pushed, we learned from other people who were there that the government of the day also wanted us and the PAC to be at the negotiation table. But as people know, finally the negotiation started, the CODESA negotiation. And the CODESA negotiations were held without us being there. But several of the Bantustan leaders were then at the negotiations table, and the negotiation went the way they went. And as we all know, the fundamental matter of land was never resolved. In fact, finally, the ANC gave in to what is referred to as the sunset clause in order for the negotiations to be concluded, which means compromising even further the elements of our country's existence. Now, that's an important matter to us even today, that sunset clause and all the other things that took place there. It's a history that even today AZAPO still want to correct. Because fundamentally, as you know, AZAPO, is that until the question of the land is settled, until the land is returned to their legitimate owners, because you must remember, South Africa was colonized. And the Communist Party at some stage referred to it as a colonialism of a special kind, whilst we felt that there is no colonialism of a special kind. It's a colonialism. It's just full stop. Period. Colonialism, is the subjugation of indigenous people to the power of foreigners who come and take over their land and property and all the minerals that are there. And for them to have called it a special kind, AZAPO couldn't agree. So the situation even today cannot be resolved simply because the fundamental ill, what other people refer to, and I agree with them, the original sin. The original sin is that of colonialism, is that of people who come and take your property, take everything that belongs to you, enrich themselves, and fundamentally live on the richness of your land, and turn around and say you can have your land back, and that you must negotiate something which will be beneficial to them. That is unacceptable to AZAPO. So that's the cornerstone. So a settlement was reached which did not tackle the fundamental issues that pertains to the dignity of black people. The fundamental issue was left out. And that is why even today we are still battling with that issue. I really, at the moment, I can say, I don't believe the African National Congress is capable of making sure that our land is returned back to the rightful owners. And the matter is in Parliament now. But I'm saying so. Perhaps I will be proved wrong. But from my association with the ANC and the negotiation that I told you we entered in order to convince them, I certainly don't believe that they have a capacity or willingness to do so. They are a ruling party, that's okay, but unfortunately, they don't seem to be worried about the property that belongs to black people of this country. Now, every country, just if I were to digress a little bit before I get to the next topic, every country, doesn't matter where it is, has got certain assets that are within its geographic boundaries. And those assets are supposed to be the assets of the inhabitant of that particular country. And that the assets must be used in order to make life of the inhabitants better and better and better all the time. Now, if you say South Africa belongs to all of us who live in it, and the black people don't own the minerals. They own them on paper. There's no black fellow who is digging up the mineral and really owning the fundamental minerals of our country. And you say it belongs to all of us, when actually the minerals are being used to continue to enrich the capitalist. So it can't be. Belonging, and when you say property belongs to you, you mean that property I can use for the betterment of my life. It's not happening in South Africa. So don't come and tell me that South Africa belongs to black people as well. Right? But if you are arguing in terms of their historic right to land, Yes, we are together. That is why AZAPO has been raising it all the time. But it's not only just to say I'm an owner historically and I feel happy, it's enshrined in the Constitution. No. The assets of that country must be able to make sure that your life is better. And at the moment, the assets of what is called South Africa are not in the hands of black people. So that's a fundamental map which must be changed. And corona virus pandemic has shown that the assets are not in the hands of black people. Now, let me turn to the next issue, which is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission came as a result again of the compromise that was made at Kempton Park when they negotiated a dispensation which we live under. Now, these white folks who colonized and who were using the assets and the resources of our country to feed themselves and their children alone as a minority, they then negotiated a package. One of the package was that if at all we become a new country with a new constitution, they don't want to be punished for the things they did prior to the event of the new constitution. So they went on to negotiate again with the liberation movements there to say, no, if ever we form a new country, we would like you guys never to say we committed atrocities and send us to jail and punish us. An agreement again was reached on that basis when actually, ever since they arrived, the colonialists, people have been dying every day. Their land has been taken by force, cattle, all other things happen. And yet, an agreement was reached that no, they must be left alone, provided they reveal what they were doing. So AZAPO was not happy again. This is AZAPO's argument. AZAPO just said, as far as we are concerned, anybody who commits crime, doesn't matter who you are, you must be punished for the crime you have committed. And this crime that AZAPO wanted to be punishable was declared by the United Nations and the World Council of Churches as a crime against humanity. The other day, de Klerk went to Parliament. Only then, those who agreed that he must get scot-free were now raising the same matter that AZAPO was raising earlier on. Now, when people who couldn't agree with us on that punishment of the perpetrators of apartheid and this crime against humanity, we took the matter to the Constitutional Court in order to challenge the act that brought about the matter that they should be scot-free. And at the Constitutional Court, we argued that the crime of apartheid was declared a crime against humanity, and therefore, by international standard and law, it's punishable, and these fellows must be punished. And the case we took to court was very exemplary as far as we're concerned, because we took very important families to the Constitutional Court. One of the families who was part of the case with AZAPO was the Ribeiro family, on behalf of Ribeiro, who was killed by the Boers, and the Griffiths Mkange's family, and also the Steve Biko family. So it was, the application was AZAPO, it was Steve Biko's family, it was Griffiths Mkange, it was Ribeiro. Now you must remember, AZAPO was a black consciousness movement, the Griffiths Mkange was the ANC, and Ribeiro was the Pan-Africanist Congress. We were still consistent on the fact that the liberation movement must challenge this. And I want again to thank the families who agreed with us that this is a fundamental case, that their own relatives were murdered and they wanted the perpetrators to be punished. But we didn't win the case. Again, the Judge Mohammed, who was the Chief Justice, agreed with us. And even in the judgment, I'm going to read a portion of that judgment so that you can really be rest assured that the case we took there was fundamental. The judge also agreed. But finally the judge says, no, my hands are tied. You know, the judges always say, my hands are tied by legislation. And it's legislated that I shouldn't actually punish these fellows. So they will not, I cannot agree with you on the basis of that technicality of the Constitution which was drafted by our other liberation movements. So we were tied, we were condemned by our own people that what we are doing is wrong. And we felt very uncomfortable when it came to the fact that we should be punished that way. But we were happy that Judge Mohammed was able to agree with us. I'm just going to read a portion of the judgment where he agrees with AZAPO. So just listen to me a bit so that I can read to you. The judge says, I understand perfectly well why the applicants, meaning AZAPO and the families, would want to insist that those wrongdoers who abused their authority and wrongfully murdered, maimed, or tortured very much loved members of their families who had, in their view, been engaged in a noble struggle. Because that's what we argued, that we were engaged in a noble struggle. It was a struggle to free our country, whilst the perpetrators were struggling to oppress us, confront the inhumanity of apartheid, should vigorously be persecuted and effectively be punished for their callous, inhumane conduct in violation of criminal law. Mohammed says he understands why we should insist. I can therefore also understand, it's Judge Mohammed, why they are emotionally unable to identify themselves with the consequences of the legal concession made in this regard. He says further, every decent human being must feel grave discomfort in living with the consequence which might allow the perpetrators of evil acts to walk the streets of this land with impunity, protected in their freedom by amnesty, immune from constitutional attack. So let me leave it at that, to say even Mohammed was aware of the fact that what the perpetrators did was a criminal offense, and that he understood really why we were even emotional over this matter, because it was necessary in AZAPO's view that the perpetrators of an evil system of apartheid should be punished. And up to today, AZAPO still insists there will come a day when the perpetrators of the evil system will be punished. Even those who went to the TRC, some of them went there, they didn't divulge everything that they did. And they are still roaming around and enjoying the fruits of apartheid, the fruits of our own wealth. And we are still languishing in poverty. So that is precisely the matters that I was asked by AZAPO Limpopo to deal with. And I hope that I have introduced to the viewers these important topics, and that will continue to dialogue so that our country should be free from all forms of oppression. The land must be brought back to the rightful owners. It mustn't be just a talk that the country belongs to black people as well, when actually black people do not own the minerals, don't enjoy the fruits of the assets of their own country. I thank you. Hello? Yeah, I'm done. Yeah, but I'm still on live here. You are doing what? Oh, all right. I must do what? Oh, all right. I'll see what it is there. Yeah. But I'm done. I'm saying to everybody who has been listening, that is the talk of the day. And if they want to ask questions, they are free to do so. Yeah.